Hello, Alabama fans. My name is Tim Watts, and I'm the publisher of BamaOnLine.com. With us today is Charlie Potter, our lead team recruiting analyst, senior analyst. He's actually turned into one of the older guys because we got young Blake Byler, who's joined us and also helps covering the team. Later in the show, we're going to cover recruiting with Andrew Bone, our recruiting editor, and Joseph Hastings, our recruiting analyst. We're also going to bring in Jimmy Stein, who dips his toes into both of them. But yes, we have a good show for you. We do it every Tuesday. Every BOL staff member's here. We appreciate you being here. Odd weekend, Charlie Potter. I mean, definitely not what any of us expected to be talking about. We're not going to harp on Vandy. Obviously, it's been talked to death. But just initial thoughts. The shock value of being there and witnessing that, and Vanderbilt playing a fantastic football game.
Yeah, it was strange to say the least. I think you're right, though. I think Vanderbilt deserves a lot of credit, especially for what they did offensively. Alabama didn't have many answers for that. Vandy went 12 of 18 on third down, and Alabama had been really good on third down this season. I think in its first four games, they had only given up 11 first downs or 11 third down conversions. So Vandy surpassed that in one game. So they were able to stay on the field, sustain drives. The time of possession, which a lot of times is just kind of a stat that people glaze over, but they dominated that. They had over 42 minutes of the football, and so tip of the cap to Clark Lee and that staff for what they were able to do. But yeah, it was a pretty embarrassing performance, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I don't think any of us saw that coming. I don't think Alabama and its players saw that coming. We talked all week about avoiding a letdown. They said all the right things. It seemed like they were taking the right approach, but maybe they were lingering too much on that Georgia game and thought they could just walk into Nashville and win it. And, I know that a lot's been said about the atmosphere. I know Clark Lee's talked about being pissed off about the Nick Saban comment that he allegedly didn't know happened after the game. But, it was a very pro-Alabama atmosphere. I think Blake and I would agree it's probably 75-25 at least. So, that's not something that was a factor in the game. It's just Alabama didn't come ready to play and didn't really adjust anything defensively.
And we all know Saban long enough to know he's referring to the home field advantage there, it
Yeah.
being a small place and all that. He wasn't saying he's never going to assault anybody, but it's usually traditionally a pretty easy place to play. I don't
Mhm.
think he was wild there. Blake, you haven't been doing this as long as Charlie, but shock value, did you keep waiting for that moment? Well, here they go. Here they go. Now we're taking note. Now it's coming. Now it's coming. And it just never really came.
Yeah, that puts it about exactly how I was feeling during the game, because you see them go down 7-0 on the Vanderbilt opening drive, and then the pick six makes it 13-0, and you're like, okay, they're fine. Like, they'll get it figured out, and they'll end up winning this game by a couple scores. Like, that's what you would think kind of in the opening minutes of that game. And then Vanderbilt just kept being able to sustain drives and extend that lead. But even then, Alabama kept chipping away. And you go into halftime down 9 points, I think, and then Alabama gets the ball out of half. They go down and score a touchdown, and it's a 2-point game early in the third quarter. I think it's 23-21.
Mhm.
And I think all of us kind of in the press box had this feeling that was like, okay, now they're going to get a stop. They're going to go score again, and they're just kind of going to run away with it. That's what everybody expected. But like you said, Tim, that moment never came. And repeatedly, Alabama either gave up a long drive that allowed Vanderbilt to extend the lead, or even in times where Alabama got the ball back. I think about that fumble that we were talking about before we started recording that Jalen Milroe had. Alabama was going down to go take the lead in the game, and they had never led the entire game. And that's just a mistake that's incredibly costly in that moment, because now you give the ball to Vanderbilt at midfield with the lead, with the chance to go make it a two-score game in the fourth quarter. And so every time that we thought kind of Alabama was going to go and take the lead, whether it was the score out of half or the incredible Ryan Williams touchdown catch and down the sideline touchdown, it never came. And that's not what we've grown to expect, and not something that is just something that's really surprising to see from Alabama, especially in a game like that. Like, I thought the script was kind of going like it did against South Florida a couple weeks ago, where by the time late in the game, they'll be worn down and they'll make a couple plays and they'll end up winning by a couple of scores. But yeah, it never happened, and that was surprising, and that's something that they have to reason with and figure out how to fix moving forward.
Yeah, let's talk about Malachi a little bit, Charlie. I mean, when you follow this pro, we followed him in high school. We followed him at Alabama for 5 years. I mean, no excuses made. I think his apology sort of summed up everything we thought, but I think maybe Malachi, as much as anybody, knew what it meant to lose to Vanderbilt, and it's not an excuse. I mean, I think he was kind of channeling most of the fan base right there. I mean, if they had mouthpieces to throw, they were throwing them. If they had footballs to kick, they were throwing them. Not to make light of it, but I thought his statement, that he came out with yesterday was a pretty good statement.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. I think, maybe he was thinking he could get a penalty and stop the clock with his decision to kick the ball because he wasn't anywhere near the ball. He came in there, it
Yeah.
kind of looked like he had a plan. And I'm not making an excuse for him by any
Oh,
means
no.
because it's not a good look. But Malachi's a great kid. There's a reason he's a two-time team captain. And I think that he has been very upfront and forthcoming about his actions, not only just the penalty, he threw his mouthpiece. It was very clear from the press box at the very least of how upset he was at the end of the game. And Malachi didn't play well. There's not very many people in the defense that played well, but there's some guys like Tim Keenan and Jahai Campbell and Deontay Lawson kind of got in his face a little bit and tried to calm him down. And I know a lot of people are upset the fact that he kind of refused to come off the field. That doesn't bother me as much because I think, again, it goes back to what Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack said. It means something to Malachi. Hell, I think, not to the extent that he showed, but you could have had 10 more of those on the field at points on Saturday night. And I think he might have been able to get one of those stops that we were talking about. So I think it's something that he's learned from. I think he's taking ownership of his actions. And, that's something, Malachi's always been a fiery player. He's been that way all season long when they've messed up. He's been in guys' faces. He came back for a fifth season for a reason, and that's to win a national championship. And when you lose a game, not just a game, but to Vanderbilt, you're going to feel some type of way about it. And again, that's not making an excuse for it. I think he said the right things. His coaching staff's been behind him. I think Alabama would like to put it behind them. And I think the interesting thing, though, is just to see some of the reaction from some former players. I think it's been a bit too much. I know Malachi's reached out to some of those guys, and we'll see what happens from there. But I think they've done the right things in the wake of that moment.
I think history gets rewritten that there was never problems like this. I mean, we're 2 years removed from a player, attacking Josh Chapman. You know what I mean? There's been stuff. I mean, it's football. There's no, I'm not to say that choir boys don't fight because they do, but I mean, in a football locker room with emotions and a lot of testosterone and alpha males out the rear, I mean, there's going to be, stuff went down in the Saban era too. I mean, it's going to be written in a year from now. It will have been all, everybody had a 4.0, graduated, left national championship. It'll be rewritten, but there's always going to be at every level some kind of drama. And at the end of the day, he kicked a football. It was a bad look. Didn't need to do it. It was completely unnecessary. Threw his mouthpiece, wouldn't come out of the game. All of that is true. It was a bad look, and I think he understood it probably as much as anybody. But I do think we've been told other people have already talked to him on the team, and I think Malachi understands. Blake, let's move on a little bit. Yesterday, y'all got to talk to the coordinators. Everybody wants to know about Nick Sheridan. No, I'm just kidding. They want to know about Kane Womack. Give us some of your thoughts on, Kane and, having to stand in the pocket, so to speak, and deal with it.
Well, one thing I did notice is that I feel like Kane Womack yesterday was kind of in a lose-lose situation because they did play very poorly, and he knew that, and he owned up to that. He took responsibility. He said, it's my job as a defensive coordinator to get them ready, and they weren't. I feel like he still received a lot of backlash and criticism for the things he said yesterday, which was going to happen regardless because you had a lot of people that were like, yeah, coach, but what are you going to do about it? And it's like, you can't do anything about it. It's Monday. Like, they don't play until Saturday. We can't see the results of the changes that he's implementing and whatever else until they take the field against South Carolina. So I felt like he was sort of in a lose-lose situation yesterday. But overall, I thought, he walked through kind of what their defense's keys to the game were and how they went 0 for 3 on keys to the game. And basically all things that we knew from watching the game. And the other thing I think is that he wasn't going to go deep into specifics as far as game plan and scheme and everything like that. Like all the things that people want to hear, where he's like, we did this and it didn't work, so now we're going to do this. Like, that's not, a coach isn't going to say that at a press conference. They're not going to be kind of being live streamed to the country for any coach, any fan, any opposing coaching staff to go watch and see, oh, Alabama's going to change their defense by doing this, this, and this. Like, that's not going to happen. So I think it's unreasonable to expect to get verbal answers as to what's going to happen with this defense moving forward. But I do think he was very confident. Both he and Coach DeBoer were confident that there has been already a visible response from these guys from what we saw and from the disaster that was Saturday. And they said they've responded well and they've already started moving forward towards South Carolina, which I think is a good thing to hear. But again, it's one thing that we're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to see them take the field at 11 o'clock on Saturday to really see how any of these changes or if any changes have taken place. But overall, I thought they said the right things, which is a good thing. I don't think they went up and had a bad press conference or anything like that, but it's still a wait and see until they play another football game.
Charlie, really was a no-win, like Blake kind of alluded to. I mean, I got a lot of no blanks, like no kiddings from my friends. Everything he said, I think people were flying airplanes and watching this press conference, some of my friends, and in the middle of court cases, and they were like commenting as he said stuff. And then I go to the thread and they're all saying it. So all the thought process was the same when he said, we didn't play well. No shit. So
yeah. Well, Blake and I talked about it quite a bit. There were a lot of people that wanted us to say some crazy things to Kane Womack in the press conference. I think I got offered over $1,000 to say some things. And, I think people realize too, if I had said what they wanted to say every time, that I would never get to ask questions in that room again. But I mean, the reactions were kind of what you expected. I had to mute some tweets just because it was nonstop, just like what you said, like no kidding. But I mean, he's addressing the elephant in the room. And like Blake said, they're not going to come out and say, give away the game plan or kind of talking specifics. But I thought Kane Womack took ownership for the most part. He talked about just on third and fourth down. That's kind of been the thing that they've struggled with the last 6 quarters where they've given up 60 points is, they need to be better in man coverage. And that's, from the linebackers on, they need to make those windows a little tighter. And that's a specific thing I think that people would agree they need to clean up on. But I mean, again, it's a lose-lose in a situation like that. People are pissed, and I think it's not going to really change until Saturday. And even if Alabama goes out and kind of beats the piss out of South Carolina, I think this is going to stick in the back of people's minds for a while. And if you're the coaches, you got to realize that you got to move on. I think that's the key to this. Is kind of Blake alluded to. You need to move on. And I know we're to blame for some of this, just because after a big win over Georgia, that's what you're talking about. You're not asking many questions about Vanderbilt. That's just human nature. But they need to really, flush this as much as possible and start really focusing on South Carolina.
Yeah, and they've got a chance of goodwill. You can beat South Carolina, win at Knoxville. I mean, there's certainly, fans forget. This game they'll never forget.
No.
Every time something happens. I had grown men, and of course it was on the BOL roundtable message board. They were blaming ice cream, dry fit T-shirts. They were blaming, and I had buddies, like good friends, going, "Can you believe he dresses that way?" And they hang out with me. I'm in a hoodie and cargo shorts in 11-degree weather, so I'm not really one to judge. But again, turning the page, go to South Carolina. Blake, what are you expecting or hoping to see this week from this team?
Well, first and foremost, you want to see a win, because coming off a loss like that, like they've kind of used their major mulligan. You can maybe afford, when you're talking playoff, another loss to a better team like a Tennessee or an LSU, but you've got to beat South Carolina first and foremost coming back home. But I think expectations based off what we've kind of heard, and I expect that we'll hear more today. It seems like the players have, like I said earlier, responded well to what they're needing to do to adjust and make changes going forward. I think we'll see. I believe Kane Womack said yesterday that the defense, he expects them to play with a level of urgency that the fans will appreciate, were his words yesterday. And I think seeing a sense of urgency is massive and something that you need to see out of this team after taking a loss like that, especially on the defensive side. Now, the offense, we haven't really covered on this so far, and I'm not really worried about the offense. I mean, they played well. They had the two turnovers that were kind of fluky. Like you have a whiffed block, and then the quarterback gets sacked and fumbles, and then you have a tipped ball off a helmet that ends up being a pick six. Like those aren't like terrible decisions by a quarterback or anything. Like overall, the offense scored 35 points. They only ran 46 plays. Like that's really good from the offense. So I expect them to continue rolling the way they have. I mean, Jalen Milroe played really well on Saturday against Vanderbilt. We haven't really gotten to talk about it because of the loss and because of the way the defense played. But I think if we see that sense of urgency from the defense that they've been talking about, and I mean, shoot, they have no better reason than to play with a sense of urgency than right now coming off of that loss. So if we see that, we should see a good performance overall out of this team. And you look at the point spread, they're 21-point favorites again. So Vegas seems to think that they're going to roll South Carolina, which I know I've seen a lot of fans already being like, wow, South Carolina is the freest money you've ever seen plus the points. And I mean,
they're always hammering. They're always hammering something, you know,
right.
Everybody's hammering it, you know?
Yeah. But
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, just seeing that they're a 21-point favorite, I mean, Vegas expects them to respond.
Yeah.
But we have to, like I said earlier, we got to see it on the field, and we've got to see that sense of urgency and everything else that these coaches have talked about that we're not actually going to see on the field until, they take it and the ball kicks off on Saturday.
Before we get out of here, we're going to ask Charlie Potter one more thing. I want to remind you that we have the BamaOnLine pregame show coming later in the week from Charlie Potter, Jimmy Stein, and Blake Byler. You can see all of Charlie, Blake's, and Jimmy's content on BamaOnline.com. Also, the recruiting coverage with Andrew Bone, Joseph Hastings, and myself, Tim Watts. Please, if you get a chance, hit the like button, hit a subscribe. You'll get all of our notifications. We have the show. We have a good time in here. We mix it up a fair amount. In the off season, we're going to do some contests on here. We're not, but I just wanted to see Charlie's initial reaction. But Charlie, get us out of here with this. I know you're going to do the preview tomorrow, drop Thursday or whatever. Give me your thoughts, what Bama needs to do going into this South Carolina game and what you expect.
The defense needs to get off the field. I think it's that simple. You need to get stops when you need to get stops. And Blake said it best. I mean, the offense hasn't been an issue. I thought Jalen played well at South Carolina. To be able to score 35 points when you only have the ball for less than 18 minutes, that's an efficient offensive football. But they need to play complementary football, and the defense needs to be able to get off the field and give the ball back to that offense, because Alabama shows it can put up 35 points a game with relative ease. I think they can average 40 or more points a game, but they need opportunities, and the defense needs to get stops. They need to force turnovers. The fact they didn't have a single turnover or sack against this Vanderbilt team is pretty embarrassing. And, this South Carolina team is pretty good. They have they're coming off a pretty big loss to Ole Miss, but Ole Miss is a good team. They're going to look to bounce back too. Lenore Sellers is a good player. I don't know if he's quite Diego Pavia and what he can do from an offensive standpoint, but this defense needs to make a statement in this game. And I think we're going to learn a lot about this team. I thought we'd learn a lot about this team with the stretch coming up after South Carolina, those games against Tennessee, Missouri, and then after the bye LSU. But I think we're going to learn a hell of a lot about this team this week. And it comes a week earlier, maybe a week earlier than a lot of people expected. But the defense needs to wake up, and it's going to be early. They need to, hit some coffee, get ready to roll, and make a statement against South Carolina.
Well, guys, we appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you on the website, BamaOnline.com roundtable. There's been a lot of discussion, interesting discussion as well. Hey, I've been proud. Those guys have – considering the stun factor, but we will see y'all later in the week, and we'll see you later on the shows. Good luck to y'all, and we'll see your coverage of South Carolina. All right, we're going to welcome in Jimmy Stein.
Hey.
Jimmy Stein's coming in. Looks like he is the airport, the hangar guy that's guiding us in. I guess it's not the hangar guy. What's that guy do? He guides us in.
Air traffic controller.
He seems very important, right?
I think John Candy played an air traffic controller in summer rental or summer vacation, something like that.
Summer rental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
he was
me.
Screaming, I can't see the plane. And there was a fly where the plane was, and they sent him on vacation. He was having a mental breakdown where he also had a mental breakdown.
That could easily happen on this show, by the way, to me.
Jimmy Stein, welcome to the show. We're going to have Andrew Bone and Joseph Hastings on later.
Great.
Jimmy, we're going to start with something positive. You're saying, how is that possible? I see you thinking it. Everybody watching's thinking it. But let's talk about Ryan Williams' catch. All right. We haven't talked about it enough. It's another, are you kidding me, catch. It's beautiful. Lynn Swan, people are starting to catch on. I think what amazes me the most is when Ryan's vertical, when he's in the air, when he hits the ground, it was like he was in the air with his feet running, because when he hits, he's already moving at another gear somehow.
It's that, I said in my never ending, I can't hype him up anymore or flatter him more with the compliments. But starting about a week ago, I guess it was after the Georgia game, I'd always said he was Devontae Smith. That's kind of who he is as a player, stylistically. But I started saying, he's Devontae Smith with a sprinkle of David Palmer. And by that, what I mean is not a specific skill set that Palmer had. No one had that. But David Palmer was a magician. He did things no one else could do. That's what Ryan sort of turned into. He's like Devontae with the sprinkle of David Palmer magic. And we saw more of it Saturday. His body control, his ball skills. Now, he did drop a ball in this game a couple times, actually. But his ball skills are fantastic. But the body control is unlike anything I've ever seen. And his ability, his burst, I'm not sure his top speed is crazy. I mean, he's not like a 4.2 guy or anything like that. But he gets to his top speed easily, quickly. And I'm not so sure, Tim, he can't reach it running backwards. I mean, he's just a uniquely athletic human being. No question about it.
Yeah, I think that, that there were so many plays. The offense made good plays, had good drives and all that stuff. Everything was lost. And it should have been. I mean, obviously the focus was on the defense and all that stuff. And even going back, I went back and just watched the offensive plays, because I did watch all the defensive plays after the game. And I watched the Georgia defensive games in the second half, defensive plays. But then yesterday, I wanted to cheer up. So I watched the offensive plays in both games. And I was like, it really is Dickens. It's a tale of two cities. Anyways, let's welcome in Andrew Bone. Andrew Bone trying to show up casually late.
Fashionably late.
Where's your lighting?
That's what happens when you have kids.
Well, Audrey didn't show up late. You showed up late, so we got some explaining to do. Anyways, Andrew, we were talking about Ryan's catch. We're gonna get into a little bit more, just some generic thoughts. But I mean, as Bama fans, we're so caught up in the Alabama loss, as we should be. But I mean, Tennessee lost at Arkansas. You had like 5 of the top 11 teams. Miami, I think that should have been a loss as well. I mean, they keep getting some benefit of the doubts with some plays. But I mean, college football, and I know we've said it for years, any given Saturday. It used to be NFL where you could find upsets. I think college football is just wide ass open right now, Andrew.
It is weird. I mean, you look at like Arkansas beating Tennessee, and even though everybody's talking about that, I mean, think about Arkansas. They lost to Oklahoma State, who lost by 24 points to West Virginia. I mean, it's a weird year. And you look at South Carolina. I mean, they were able to, barely squeak by Old Dominion, earlier in the season. And then, they played a close game against LSU. They played a close game against, I'm trying to think of who else, but Ole Miss, they get blown out 27-3 at home. So it's just like, what kind of team does everybody have? I mean, you're trying to figure out who's got the best team in the country. You look at Texas, you look at, Miami coming back from, I thought they were done when it was 30 in. I mean, you're thinking that their season's over, and obviously they were able to come back. Credit to them, but it's a strange season. I think a lot of that has to do with the transfer portal. I mean, there's good coaches at a lot of schools throughout the country, and when you can go out, you can pick players from different schools to come in and help your program in certain areas. I think that certainly helps, and it makes teams a little bit better. But at the same time, there's a lot of questions for a lot of teams moving forward, including Alabama.
Yeah, I just wonder. I mean, when you see these type of games, I mean, the surprise is there, because you just kept thinking Alabama would turn the corner. But I mean, we talked about Vandy. a fair amount with Charlie and Blake. I think it is time to turn the page. I mean, we're never going to have, it's just going to be like the ending of a great movie that they wanted where you don't know. We're never going to know the reasons exactly. Well, we know the reasons it happened, but we don't know how that came about, the process. Jimmy, turning our attention to South Carolina, you get South Carolina. I actually had South Carolina as a possible upset. I think it was a fairly popular possible upset against Ole Miss. I did not at the time know their starting quarterback, Shane Beamer, has very much misled me and is on my poo-poo list. But I thought they're running, their quarterback's coming back Sellers, totally different game. But still, for the defense to go to South Carolina, for Ole Miss, hold them to 3 points. South Carolina's obviously got some stuff to work on coming into Tuscaloosa. They had some offensive woes, and then Alabama's got some defensive woes.
In one way, I think this is a rough matchup for Alabama in one way. Alabama struggled last weekend to stop the run, and in particular, quarterback runs, option plays, and that sort of plays into a South Carolina strength. South Carolina has not just one, but two quarterbacks that they play that run the ball really well. Lenore Sellers is a good athlete. Robbie Ashford is an outstanding athlete, and you can bet Alabama's going to see some of Ashford on Saturday just to deal with maybe some RPOs and some Ashford runs. Now, they don't run the triple option, and they're not going to become Vanderbilt in a week, but they are going to try to exploit Alabama in terms of here's some plays on the ground with Sellers, with Ashford, with Rocket Sanders, who's a high-quality back. South Carolina's pretty good at running the football, and they're going to make Alabama stop that. So in that sense, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But this is something Alabama needs to work on. If they're going to have a good season, that needs to improve greatly. And here's an opportunity. South Carolina is going to give you every opportunity to improve, stopping the run, stopping the QB runs. That'll be the key to the game Saturday. And as far as, is Alabama going to win, by how much? I think just getting a win is big. Just win the game, improve, and move on.
Yeah, I think that's key. You just want to see, and obviously you want to see the defense play better. The last 6 quarters, I mean, every time I think you're done with the statistics to make me sad, they come up with, hey, we've only had caused 3 punts the last six quarters. It's a new stat every time I look up, and it's never ending, and they're legitimate stats. So obviously, you get into that. Andrew, going into this game, I know you have the same expectations as everybody else, but the offense clicking. You want to keep that focus. I mean, you got, the thing about it is you don't want to waste an offense where you've got a possible Heisman candidate, definitely Heisman candidate, Jalen Milroe. You got perhaps the best freshman in the country. And of course, both of those are arguable, who's the best quarterback and all that stuff. But you want to see that offense keep rolling. But I was a little bit surprised to see Jam Miller only get 5 carries in that game.
Yeah, and I think Nick Sheridan, talked about it yesterday. Alabama got behind the 8 ball a little bit. They were down 14-0. They were playing from behind, so you're trying to get the ball down the field a little bit more. And obviously Vanderbilt controlled the clock, but South Carolina is going to be an interesting game because I think a lot of people look at, Ole Miss went in there last week, beat them 27-3. Should be an easy game, but you had a couple guys who were coming back from injury. Lenore Sellers, who had an ankle injury. Rocket Sanders, who had an ankle injury. Those guys were. Last week was their first game back. They weren't 100%. I don't know if Rocket Sanders is going to be 100% this week, but Lenore Sellers looks a little bit better. Are they going to be able to connect on some deep balls? They weren't able to do that last week. Lenore Sellers missed some key passes. So, this is a South Carolina team that does have some good athletes. Alabama's going to have to be ready. I mean, is this going to be a team that beat Kentucky 31-6 in Lexington, or is this going to be a team that we've seen against the Old Dominions or last week against Ole Miss? They're kind of a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde team, but they've got a really good defensive line. They've got a young offensive line. They got a left tackle that's a freshman, but really good left tackle that's a freshman. But it's going to be a very interesting matchup, especially in the trenches for Alabama.
Jimmy, earlier Andrew brought up a good point with the transfer portal. Everybody thinks it just helps Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, because you hear the big names. But I'm telling you, every time in that game, when a Vanderbilt player made a big play or a big hit, they're like, he's a transfer from there. He's a transfer from there. You get that 4th, 5th year experience, and it comes in handy. I mean, Kind of reminds me, you remember 2023 NCAA basketball tournament? Alabama ran into San Diego State, number 1 overall seed. They had like double-digit juniors and seniors, on that team. So much experience, and it showed against a younger Alabama team. But obviously, the portal is a place you can hit it and hit it hard. Jimmy, you going to the game this week?
Yes. I will be there Saturday at 11 a.m. at Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium.
Quick reminder, we will have a post-game show after the game. Hopefully this one's a little bit more cheerful. We'll also have a recruiting show later in the week. We got a South Carolina game preview coming with Charlie Potter, Jimmy Stein, and Blake Byler. And I want to remind you, if you get a chance, please hit like and subscribe. We appreciate you being here. You'll get the notifications when the show comes up. We do about 4, maybe 5 a week. I think it's probably in that 4 range, but hit the thumbs up. We appreciate everyone for being here. Jimmy, we're not done yet. Don't take off the air control hanger just yet.
I thought we landed the plane. I thought the plane had landed.
You sounded a lot better this week. Last week you had a little static. I see you went and found the right stuff to fix it. But coming into this game defensively, what would you like to see? If you had one thing, and don't take the layup, get them off the field. What's one thing you want to see from this Bama defense? Just one thing.
Assignment sound. I think that was a real issue with the triple option. Hey, and that's tough. It's tough. And I did talk to sources close to the team. I mean, of course, they repped the heck out of it all week dealing with the option. But then you get in the game and Vanderbilt gives you different looks and different things than you'd seen on film. Running the same stuff, the triple option, but that's assignment-based football. You have to be very disciplined. You can't willy-nilly blitz. I mean, you got to be real assignment sound. And Alabama wasn't for a half. I think one of the things we haven't talked about enough is that Vanderbilt's only averaged 1.9 yards per rush in the second half. Alabama did a good job of kind of over-committing against the run in the second half, sort of clamped that down. But what did that do? That opened up the throws, and Diego Pavia hit them all. He was like Tim said, he's almost like a mid-major basketball shooter. He was just hot. He hit everything. So for me against South Carolina, Tim, it's being assignment sound because they're going to RPO you a lot. Alabama saw a ton of RPOs against South Florida. It won't be new, but they've got to be assignment sound when it comes to who's got the quarterback, who's got the pitch guy, and don't let people behind us run free.
Andrew Bone, what's one thing you want to see? Just a single thing.
Out of the defense?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd like to see them play with a little bit more fire, a little bit more aggression. I'd like to see a little bit more blitzing. I want to see the quarterback get on the ground a little bit more. I want to see them have a rough day. I don't want to see them want to get back up. I want to see, what we saw against LSU, back in the day when Jarrett Lee or Nussbaum are trying to crawl off the ground back to the sideline. You want to see Alabama be aggressive, be active, and make some big plays. You want to see that fire, that passion from this defense that we just didn't see last week against Vanderbilt. I mean, they were just they just got ran through it's like shit through a tin horn, like Nick Saban used to say. But man, I'm excited though about this weekend. I'm optimistic. I think they're going to play a lot better than what we saw against Vanderbilt and against the second half. Of course, I said that last week when we went to Vanderbilt, but yeah, I mean, this is a big wake up call week for them, and I think they'll be able to handle their business.
All right, Jimmy Stein, we're going to bring Joseph Hastings in, but Jimmy, you can find him at BamaOnLine.com. He'll be on the round table. We're very active there, a lot of discussion. We've been discussing ice cream, T-shirt, clothing wear. We've been discussing music, comedians. We had a good comedian thread last year. And by the way, before we get out of here, the Jets just fired their head coach. So
he's a defensive guy. And he's on the market.
This is how I found out. I got a text going, DC. I was like, dude, I don't stop.
You can't change. You can't change your whole scheme.
No. Robert Saleh seems like an NFL guy, and we've seen head coaches at the NFL get fired, go through the system, and come back as a head coach. We've seen several of them, in fact. So I do feel like Aaron Rodgers might have got him fired. I feel like they had a little beef, but bad performance last night. But anyway, Jimmy, we appreciate you. We'll see you next week, and we're looking forward to the preview show and talking to you Saturday after the game, hoping with the better results.
See y'all Saturday and next week.
Yep, absolutely.
See you.
All right, Jimmy. Joseph Hastings.
What's
You
going
got
on?
Robert Saleh fired. I hope you're happy.
Yeah, I guess I mean it was kind of expected. Him and Aaron have a weird chemistry with one another.
You know what, though? You're firing a coach because of weird chemistry with Aaron. That's going to not work out well down the year because Aaron's got some weird chemistry with pretty much everybody.
I mean he brought in what offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett just to appease Aaron. They brought in Alan Lazard. Everything's been to appease Aaron Rodgers. Look, I'm Aaron Rodgers wrecked my Cowboy seasons plenty of times before, so I'm kind of glad to see it going this way for him.
Well, let's get into a little recruiting. I mean, and before we get going, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We appreciate y'all being here. This will be the last request for the show. But we do enjoy the content. You'll get notifications when we come in. And of course, you can find our content on BamaOnLine.com along with the message board stuff. Flip watch. I think we had a little wake up nugget on a Monday morning that, Alabama could be moving in the right direction for a tight end. Marshall Pritchett committed to North Carolina. Andrew, there's been a lot of flirting going on with Alabama and Pritchett this whole time. I think he committed to North Carolina in March.
Yep.
Does that sound right? And visited Alabama in either March or April. So happened pretty quick. But there's been a lot of communication back and forth.
Yeah, so Marshall Pritchett and his family visited Alabama back in the early spring, and then he committed to North Carolina. He did not have an offer from Alabama at the time. Staff went out and saw him, evaluated him during the spring evaluation period. Brian Ellis, the tight ends coach, really liked him a lot. They brought him back for an official visit during the summer. And, it kind of seemed like after the summer, things, went a little quiet. Alabama picked up a commitment from Caleb Edwards, number 6 tight end in the country out of California. But they were always kind of interested in taking 2 tight ends in this class, and communication remained with Marshall Pritchett throughout the rest of the summer into the fall, and he came back for the Georgia game 2 weekends ago. So relationship there has been very strong for the last several months.
Yeah, the thing about it is when you look that, we said the Bama staff would take 2 if they could. 2 tight ends, and they'd have to complement each other. When you watch Marshall, and his senior film is good stuff. I mean, it's not going to be the sexy blow you away, but I mean, he is doing one thing I noticed is his blocking on the edge. And, a play that hasn't even been mentioned is Caleb Oden's block on Jam Miller when he popped out on the right for a touchdown. He was walking in because Caleb came over there and picked off a bandit. That's the kind of blocking you can get from those big tight ends. Caleb Edwards is a monster. I mean, he is a grown man. I mean, and he does play defensive line. If you flipped into the defensive line, you said he's defensive lineman, it wouldn't surprise you. But they could be a little yin and yang, complement each other really well. Joseph, you had a good interview on BamaOnLine with Duke Johnson, a guy that committed fairly early. Has been a little bit quiet, not super talkative, but when he talks, I mean, it resonates.
It really does. He's the longest tenured commitment of the Kalen DeBoer era. Obviously, Anthony Rogers committed back during Nick Saban's time. So, Duke kind of appreciates that title of being that guy who's kind of held the class together. He always talks with the commitments, make sure that they're locked in. And after the Georgia game, he texted Andres Hayes Fawcett immediately and said his recruitment shut down. Echoed those same sentiments when we caught up, talked about the Vanderbilt loss, and not having a sky is falling mentality following the game, and just saying that Alabama needs to get back to being the standard, which which he says they know they are. Used a lot of we words, very encouraging stuff. Plans on being back at Alabama for the South Carolina game. And look, he's a top 50 overall player. Very productive. Just had 17 tackles and a caused fumble last week. For his team, which is 7-0 on the season after going 1-9, just has very strong leadership qualities and somebody that has definitely been a leader of this 2025 group, especially on the defensive side.
Yeah, the thing about Duke, and again, there's no excuses. Bama has talent on defense, but it's a different kind of talent than what Kane Womack might necessarily choose. But Duke is that guy that you look at coming off the edge, being in space and defending people. He's almost like a safety, old school. I think when we were starting up in this, Andrew, he'd have been more of a safety than a linebacker. But that is the new age safety. Every time the linebackers commit now, everybody says nobody's taking small linebackers like that. Go look around the country. Everybody's taking these guys. The big linebackers that we were used to seeing growing up, the true Mike linebackers, you're just not going to see them anymore. I mean, they'll find a place somewhere else. Andrew, speaking of leaders and talented guys Bama's got, I mean, you had a good interview with Dijon Lee, 5-star defensive back from California, a guy that's been, Courtney Morgan's did a great job there, carried over the relationship. But tell us what he said and, our reaction to, a lot of these guys shutting it down and not really, worried about this Vanderbilt loss from the seams.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us on Sunday was talking to guys that are on the defensive side of the ball in the recruiting class and, their overall thoughts about the game. But, what I kind of took away from talking to different guys, including Dijon Lee, is, the Alabama coaching staff kind of reached out to all these guys pretty much immediately. And Dijon Lee had a great conversation with Kalen DeBoer on Sunday. He was the only coach he talked to. He normally talks to Courtney Morgan and Mo Lindquist, but Sunday was just about a conversation with Coach DeBoer, what went wrong, what they're going to do to kind of get things right. And, he said, we talked about this earlier in the show with Jimmy about all the different upsets on Saturday. Cal almost beating Miami, you had Minnesota beating USC, and Arkansas beating Tennessee. And that's something that Dijon Lee brought up. He said, I keep hearing from different people, different fan bases, oh, look at Alabama. And he said, look at what happened around the country. It's not just Alabama. There were a lot of upsets, and it happens every single week in college football. It just so happened to happen to Alabama on this particular weekend. He said, just because they lost doesn't mean it's going to change my recruitment at all. Now, he is taking some visits. He's going to Georgia this weekend. He's going to go out to Texas A&M next month. But those were visits that have been planned since before the start of the season. So I don't think, people might see that pop up this week. He's taking a visit to Georgia and think it's some just reaction to Alabama's loss to Vanderbilt. It's not. It's was pre-planned for the last couple months. He was always taking these visits. He seems, in my opinion, very solid with his commitment to Alabama. We've got a great interview on BOL right now, so go check that out.
Yeah, another guy everybody's curious about, and us as well. I mean, is Caleb Cunningham, Joseph. I mean, he's a 5-star wide receiver from Mississippi, committed to Alabama. A lot of offers. I mean, one of those name of school kind of athletes. He has told us early on what he was going to do, and he's following through with it. I mean, it's very similar to what Ryan Williams did, where and again, we spent 20 years saying follow the visits. I think we're more about the surprise visits than anything. If a kid shows up, doesn't tell his staff, that's the stuff you worry about. But Caleb's been pretty candid, not only about taking visits, but where he stands, his commitment stands.
Yeah, and I mentioned it back in the summer, when Caleb was still talking about taking visits elsewhere. He, the reported Big Cat weekend visit to Auburn, which he didn't end up going to. He's taking his visits to Mississippi State and Ole Miss. But I said, look, you'd rather have Caleb Cunningham committed to Alabama, recruiting for your school, tweeting out the elephant emojis, all this kind of stuff, than him not being committed and trying to get that last minute commitment from him on signing day, which is when he was originally going to plan on announcing his decision. So you got him in the class. He continues to talk about how he's locked in with the Crimson Tide, but still going to take trips elsewhere. He spoke with Jamarcus Shepard on Sunday, also spoke with a support staff member after the Vandy loss. Shepard actually stopped by his school last week on Friday, got to see him put up over 100 yards and a couple of touchdowns. They've got a great relationship with one another. He talks about it all the time, the energy that Coach Shepard has. It matches Cunningham's energy. And Bone, you and I have spoken with Caleb a few times now over the past year and a half. He's got a ton of energy, always laughing, and that kind of matches the vibe of Jamarcus Shepard. So, he's still open to taking some more trips, still communicating with other schools, but maintains he's firm with Bama.
Another guy I found super interesting in this class, because the optics early on are so important to some people. Like, they don't trust their own eyes. They have to trust they trust the rankings. But we saw it with Keelan Russell. Where's the whole? So now we're taking SMU commits. Where's that crowd? Because that was a minority, but they were pretty boisterous. You know what I mean? Like, we're taking this. That's been quiet. Another one in that same mold was Luke Metz. A lot of he's not SEC quality. He can't play. And then all of a sudden he's got a ton more offers. He's got Georgia putting the full court press on him, Andrew. He's got Oregon another. I mean, these are some pretty good programs that are after Luke Metz for him not to be able to play at that level. So he's had a lot of schools, trying to, flip him or stay involved, Andrew.
Yeah, and Oklahoma, Brent Venables, known as a great defensive mind. He sent his defense coordinator out to Luke Metz's game 2 Fridays ago. So you've got some top programs that are still heavily recruiting Luke Metz. Now, we had a chance to speak to Luke on Sunday, who also spoke with Alabama. Spoke with Kane Womack on Saturday night, actually, shortly after the game, and he's still pretty locked in with Alabama. There's other schools that I mentioned that are still trying to get him on campus. Doesn't have anything planned at this time, but he's there's guys in this recruiting class that we've seen really kind of grow as far as their ranking, their interest level. I mean, credit to the Alabama staff because they jumped on a lot of these guys early. With Metz, with Keelan, with Jackson Lloyd, who Jackson Lloyd was the 3-star when Alabama first offered him and didn't have a.
You're forgetting one, Andrew. You're forgetting one. Go north. Go north. There you go. I was about to say Sopranos. Absolutely.
I mean,
there's so many
major offers. So, yeah. I think the coaching staff knows how to evaluate, and they've obviously done a great job of recruiting so far.
Yeah, rankings meant very little. I think we agree with that. This week's coming in South Carolina. We're not looking at a huge visitor list. But the thing is, on Monday and Tuesday, most of the times outside of Georgia, we're never really expecting a huge visitor list. But damn it, come Friday, you know what I mean? We're adding names, at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night with guys coming in. One guy who we don't know if he's coming in, but one guy that recently got that offer, Joseph, was an Auburn commitment, cornerback, obviously looking to add some more guys in the secondary to an already pretty good group, was Donovan Starr.
Yeah, Donovan Starr received an offer from Alabama last week. Courtney Morgan visited his school. He also talked with Coach Linguist, got the offer from him. Been in communication with Coach Linguist for a few months now, looking to set up a trip to Alabama. He's got some other schools in pursuit of him too. Plans on officially visiting Michigan this month. Also eyeing a trip to Vanderbilt. He was there at the game this past weekend. Officially visited Illinois last month. He's actually from Illinois and committed to Auburn. So little bit of an interesting recruitment there with, some schools in the Midwest, those ties there recruiting him. And then also in the South, continuing to pursue him with Alabama recruiting him. And, Auburn's still trying to hold on to his commitment. But, that's a recruitment that's, we've seen these type of ones pick up where, you start to see a heat up in the senior year and a couple months to signing day, kind of anything can happen. So, we talk about it a lot. Let's just wait to see when that visit gets locked in. And then kind of go from there, see what the feedback is. But right now, it's encouraging that he's expressing interest in taking a visit and says that he has high interest overall in Alabama.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about recruiting has always been, like, if one big name school, you can tell there's a lot of schools watching some kids. And then when a big name school, Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, whoever you want to Texas, pull the trigger, that really can start a domino effect. I mean, we've seen it on the underclassmen. It's absurd. We see somebody, we see it from the Bama angle. Hey, you got a Bama offer. Hey, you got an Oklahoma offer. He got an LSU offer. He got a Texas offer. And I'm sure that happens at other schools, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. And, we've seen, especially with Alabama and Georgia this fall, we've seen them, kind of piggyback off. I would say they're following each other, but it's right around the same time that we've seen some different offers that have gotten extended, especially on the defensive line with Joseph Bachua and Christian Ingram. Those are two big defensive linemen in the state of Georgia, both I think visiting Georgia this weekend. But I mean, it happens. It's always it's never not going to happen where we're going to see a school extend an offer. It doesn't always mean that kid can commit to that program right then, but it does open up the door for some other schools to look at those players a little bit harder, extend that offer and say, hey, you know what? They're good enough to play at that school or this school. Let's extend them an offer. Let's get them on campus. Let's continue to evaluate them, then decide if we're going to put that green light out in there for them to commit.
think Joseph's too young for this because you remember early on, Andrew, you would get, you are too young. I'm sorry. I'm not even sure what to tell you. When I met you, I was having to explain to you that you can watch old movies on TV. You were like, Top Gun's old. Where am I going to find it? I said, I don't know. Let's go dig in the desert in the sand. Maybe we'll get a copy. But Joseph, a long time ago, coaches would rush to be the first offer with very little information. Correct, Andrew? So they could come back to say, dude, we offered you first. We've been here since you were 11 years old. I mean, it wasn't that absurd, but it was kind of funny back in the day. And you know what slowed it down? A few kids committing or getting ready to commit, and they were like having to stop it. So that adjusted itself. Joseph Hastings, one thought heading into this weekend, one thought on the Alabama class, just in general. I guess that's two thoughts. My bad. Give us some thoughts on where we're at. Was it 9 weeks to go? You're the math major here. 9 weeks to go before signing day.
Yeah, we're getting there. Just about 8 weeks, a week and 8 weeks in a day. Butched that one, but my final thought is just that one game isn't going to make or break a recruiting class, especially when you've got most of your commitments filled in that 2025 group, and 2026 there's still ways to go. I think everyone thought after Alabama beat Georgia or heading into that game that if Alabama beat Georgia, it would get 10, 15 commitments and everybody would want to join the class, and then everyone thinks that after they lose to Vanderbilt, the whole class is going to fall apart. Recruiting, there's a lot of ebbs and flows. And, I think the interviews we've had with Alabama's commitments really kind of showed that, you're going to take it one game at a time, one season at a time, build those relationships with the coaching staffs, and not weigh one thing more than the other, just because you're in the heat of the moment. It wasn't a great result for Alabama on Saturday, but they can bounce back. And like you mentioned before, they've got all their goals in front of them.
One thing, we're getting into that weird window. Like, if you're a parent, your parents have ran into it. Andrew's going to run into it, and I run into it. If a kid, say, needs a coat and it's 7 weeks till Christmas, do you give it to them now or do you wait till the Christmas present? I think we're almost at that stage, Andrew. We're getting pretty close to signing day for some of these kids. Maybe they want to wait it out, build the suspense, have that big setting at their school.
Yeah, especially with the guys that are one, either not committed or commitments elsewhere that are still taking visits. A lot of them are going to take it all the way down until the end. I mean, you have games, you have college football games on the final weekend before the early signing period, which is crazy. I mean, that's never happened before. And you got guys that are going to be out on the road, visiting different schools. What's going to potentially take place during that final weekend before the big reveal on December the 4th. It's going to be really interesting, kind of see how all of that plays out, because there are some Alabama commitments right now who are saying, as of right now, things can change, that they're taking visits to different schools on that final weekend. They may not think, hey, that's the final weekend before the early signing period. So Alabama is going to be, certainly trying to get all of its commitments on campus for that Iron Bowl weekend, rather than having to worry about some of their guys out somewhere else.
Yeah, I think my final thought is that, like, the one thing I've noticed, and I've had to mentally change, is visits now don't mean what visits used to mean. You know what I mean? Like, kids go, there used to be a collection of, no, you're not coming. No, we don't want you here. They think that kids would recruit for their school, which they did. I mean, we heard all kind of crazy stuff, kids on visits to a school rooting against that team, a lot of crazy stuff. But now I think it's pretty open. I think there's no shut door, especially with the portal, right? I mean, sometimes when you lose, you don't necessarily lose. You just lost, the first year of their career, seeing a lot of guys hit the portal. And again, with coaching changes and the uncertainty that goes with that, certainly things can change pretty quickly. All right, boys, good show as always. We're going to get y'all out of here. Again, you can see us at BamaOnLine.com, the roundtable message board. These two have already dropped some stories this morning. We got a few more coming out. We're going to have some heavy content leading into the South Carolina. We'll be working on that visitors list. But as always, roll tide, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. Joseph Hastings, would you like to say goodbye?
Thank you all. Take care.
Andrew,
thank you guys, and everybody who is in the path of the hurricane, please be safe, and
yes,
we'll be praying for you guys.
That's a horrible looking storm, so our thoughts are with everybody. Good luck. All right, we'll see you guys later in the week, and I'll text you mean things as soon as I end this recording.